The air in the law office of Davies and Thorne was thick with the scent of old leather, lemon polish, and suffocating greed. Sunlight, heavy with dust motes, slanted through the tall, mullioned windows, illuminating the faces of the Caldwell family, as if they were actors on a stage, and they were acting, playing the part of grieving relatives with a practiced, hollow solemnity. Beatrice Caldwell, the eldest daughter, dabbed at a perfectly dry eye with a silk handkerchief, her diamond bracelets clinking a quiet, avaricious rhythm against each other. Her brother Marcus sat with his legs crossed, a condescending smirk playing on his lips as he surveyed the room, his gaze a tool of measurement, calculating the value of the mahogany desk, the leather-bound books, the very air they breathed. They were here for the final act of their father's life, the distribution of his immense wealth. Seated slightly apart from them, near the door as if ready to be dismissed at a moment's notice, was Alara Vance. She was a ghost in this opulent theater, a simple, unassuming figure in a plain gray dress that had been mended at the cuff. Her hands, worn from decades of service, were folded quietly in her lap. She had been Mr. Alistair Blackwood's housekeeper, his shadow, his silent companion for over 30 years. Her face was a mask of placid stillness, but her eyes, deep and observant, missed nothing. They saw the flicker of disdain in Beatrice's glance, the contemptuous curl of Marcus's lip as he looked her way. They heard the whispers that slithered between the other more distant relatives, sharp and stinging. "What is she even doing here?" one cousin hissed to another. "Did she come to polish the silver one last time?" A wave of muffled, cruel laughter followed. Beatrice leaned toward Marcus, her voice a stage whisper designed to carry. "Honestly, Marcus, Father had some odd attachments in his final years. I suppose it's a courtesy. A sentimental little severance package." Marcus snorted. "Let's hope it's little. Every penny she gets is a penny less for those who actually deserve it. His blood." Alara did not react. Her posture remained unchanged, her expression unreadable. To them, her silence was an admission of her insignificance, the quiet deference of a servant who knew her place. They could not imagine the universe of memories swirling behind her calm facade. The late nights she spent reading to Mr. Blackwood when his eyesight failed, the gentle way she'd supported his arm on his walks through the garden, the long conversations about stars and regrets and second chances when the great house was shrouded in sleep. They saw a housekeeper. They had no idea they were looking at a queen, the sole keeper of a lonely king's heart. If you believe that true worth lies not in what a person owns but in who they are, then subscribe to our channel and like this video, because the story of what happened in that room is a testament to the fact that the quietest people often have the most powerful truths to tell. The grandfather clock in the corner chimed the hour, its deep, resonant gongs marking the beginning of the end. Mr. Davies, a man whose age showed in the wisdom of his eyes rather than the stoop of his shoulders, entered the room. He carried a single thick manila envelope. His gaze swept over the expectant faces of the Caldwells, then settled for a moment on Alara. A flicker of something profound, respect, perhaps even warmth, passed between them before he turned his attention to the polished desk. He sat, placed the envelope before him, and cleared his throat. The room fell silent, the air crackling with anticipation. "We are gathered," Mr. Davies began, his voice a calm anchor in a sea of tension, "to execute the last will and testament of Mr. Alistair Blackwood." He broke the seal on the envelope with a small, sharp tear that made Beatrice jump. The final performance was about to begin. Mr. Davies adjusted his spectacles, the light glinting off the lenses and hiding his eyes for a moment. He drew out a sheaf of thick, cream-colored paper, bound by a simple blue ribbon. The will, the document that held the collective breath of the Caldwell family hostage. He began to read in a slow, deliberate cadence, his voice unchanging whether he was reciting legal boilerplate or bequeathing a fortune. The initial bequests were minor, almost trivial, designed by Mr. Blackwood. It seemed to be appetizers before a feast they were certain was coming. To a distant nephew, a collection of antique maps. To a cousin, a first-edition set of classic novels. The family members nodded with smug satisfaction, their expressions a mixture of feigned gratitude and impatience. Then came the larger items. To my son, Marcus Caldwell, Mr. Davies read, I leave my collection of vintage automobiles, including the 1958 Aston Martin, in the hope that he might one day learn that the journey is more important than the destination. Marcus preened, puffing out his chest. He shot a triumphant look at his sister as if he had won a race. To my daughter, Beatrice Caldwell Smythe, the lawyer continued, I leave my late wife's entire collection of jewelry, with the exception of one piece, in the hope that she may discover that true brilliance shines from within, not from what one wears on the outside. Beatrice's fingers flew to her throat, a gasp of pure, unadulterated avarice escaping her lips. The slight jab in her father's words flew completely over her head, lost in the dazzling mental image of sapphires and emeralds. The rest of the family murmured in envious appreciation. They were secure. The main assets, the real prizes, Blackwood Manor, the sprawling country estate that had been in their family for generations, and the controlling shares of Blackwood Industries, a corporate behemoth, were surely to be divided between the two primary heirs. It was the natural order of things. As the lawyer's voice droned on, detailing small trust funds and charitable donations, Ilara's mind drifted. She was not in the stuffy law office, but back in the quiet solitude of the manor's library. She saw Mr. Blackwood, his face illuminated by the green-shaded desk lamp, his hand trembling slightly as he wrote in a leather-bound journal. He would often look up and see her there, quietly dusting a bookshelf or straightening a rug, and he would smile. They see the house, Ilara, he had told her one evening, his voice raspy with age. They see the stocks, the portfolio, the numbers on a page. They don't see the soul of it all. They don't see the years, the memories baked into the very walls. He had paused, his gaze distant. You do, don't you? You see it. She had simply nodded, her work-roughened hand gently touching the worn spine of a book. No words were needed. He knew. In the present, Marcus was growing restless. He drummed his fingers on the arm of his chair. All right, Davies, let's get on with it, he said, the politeness in his tone thin as veneer. The house. The company. What's the split? 60-40? 50-50? Mr. Davies looked up from the paper, his gaze level and unblinking. He didn't respond to Marcus directly. Instead, he carefully turned to the next page, the rustle of the paper echoing like a gunshot in the silent room. He adjusted his glasses. Once more, a deliberate, theatrical gesture that stretched the tension to a breaking point. We now come, he announced, his voice dropping slightly, drawing everyone in, to the final and most significant portion of the estate. This pertains to the residue, which includes, but is not limited to, the property known as Blackwood Manor, all its contents, the surrounding lands, all controlling shares in Blackwood Industries, and the entirety of my liquid financial assets. The room was electric. This was it. Beatrice leaned forward, her painted nails digging into the plush velvet of her chair. Marcus had a predatory stillness about him. This was the moment their lives would be set, their status cemented for generations. They looked at each other, a shared, greedy gleam in their eyes. They were the victors. The silence in the room became a physical presence, pressing in on them. The ticking of the grandfather clock seemed to count down the seconds to a coronation. Mr. Davies took a slow, deliberate breath, his eyes fixed on the text before him. The Caldwells were coiled springs of anticipation. He read the words, and with each one, a crack appeared in the foundation of their world. All the aforementioned residue of my estate I bequeath, in its entirety, without condition or qualification. He paused. The pause was a masterpiece of cruelty, a chasm of silence into which all of the family's hopes and certainties were flung. Beatrice's painted smile was frozen on her face. Marcus's smugness had evaporated, replaced by a raw, naked hunger. Out to Ms. Ilara Vance. For a full 5 seconds, the words hung in the air, incomprehensible. The family's collective brain refused to process them. It was as if the lawyer had spoken in a foreign language. Then, reality crashed down. Beatrice let out a sound that was half shriek, half sob. "What? No, that's absurd," she stammered, her face a mask of disbelief. Marcus shot to his feet, his chair scraping violently against the polished floor. His face was a thunderous shade of crimson. "Read that again, Davies," he roared. "You've made a mistake. It's a clerical error." Mr. Davies remained serenely calm. He looked up, his gaze steady. "There is no mistake, Mr. Caldwell." "He was senile," Beatrice cried, her voice rising hysterically. "The old fool was out of his mind. She must have tricked him, coerced him. She's a manipulative, scheming—" "My father was not senile," Marcus bellowed, pointing a trembling finger at Alara, who had not moved a muscle. "She got to him. She poisoned his mind against his own family, his own flesh and blood. We'll contest this. We will drag this through every court in the country." Mr. Davies held up a single, calming hand. The gesture carried an immense weight of authority that silenced even Marcus's rage. "Mr. Blackwood anticipated this reaction," the lawyer said, his voice imbued with a sad finality. "Which is why he included a final addendum. A letter, to be read aloud in the event of any such protest." He picked up a separate, smaller envelope from the desk. It was sealed with Alistair Blackwood's personal wax seal. He broke it open and unfolded a single handwritten page. "He asks that you listen to his own words," Mr. Davies said, and began to read. The voice that filled the room was the lawyer's, but the words were pure Alistair Blackwood, raw and searingly honest. "To my children Marcus and Beatrice," the letter began. "If this is being read, it means you have reacted exactly as I knew you would, with outrage and disbelief. You stand in a room built by my life's work, and yet you have never truly seen me. You saw a bank, an institution, a resource to be tapped. You visited on holidays, your smiles as hollow as your promises to call more often. You measured your love in the cost of the gifts I gave you, and your grief in the inheritance you expected. You waited for me to die, and you were so busy waiting, you never noticed I was already gone, lonely in a house full of priceless things and empty of warmth." The words struck the siblings like physical blows. Beatrice sank back into her chair, her face ashen. Marcus stood frozen, his mouth agape. "But someone else was there," the letter continued, the tone shifting from accusation to a deep, resonant tenderness. "Alara Vance. She was there, not because she had to be, but because she chose to be. She saw a man, not a monument. When my hands shook too much to hold a book, she read to me. When my heart was heavy with regrets, she listened without judgment. She brought me tea not because it was on her list of duties, but because she noticed I was cold. She asked about my day and actually listened to the answer. Her quiet dignity was a comfort, her unwavering loyalty, a treasure more valuable than anything in my vaults. In her, I found the family I had longed for, one built not on obligation or blood, but on kindness and genuine human connection. I'm not leaving her my fortune as a reward. I am leaving it to her because she is the only one who understands its true worth. It is not money. It is a legacy, and she is the only one I trust to be its faithful steward. They coveted my possessions, but she cherished my person. The choice was never difficult. When Mr. Davies finished reading, the silence that fell was different. It was not the silence of anticipation, but the profound, heavy silence of a tomb. The air was thick with shame. The distant relatives, the silent witnesses to this brutal reckoning, could not meet Beatrice's or Marcus's eyes. They stared at the floor, at their hands, at the dusty shafts of light, anywhere but at the wreckage of the Caldwell heirs. Beatrice was weeping now, real ragged sobs of humiliation and loss. Marcus had collapsed back into his chair, all the fight gone out of him. He looked like a statue that had been shattered from within, his arrogant facade crumbling to reveal nothing but empty dust. The truth of his father's words had finally, irrevocably broken him. All this time, Ilara had remained a portrait of stoicism. But now, she slowly raised her head. Her gaze, clear and steady, moved from the weeping sister to the broken brother. There was no trace of triumph in her eyes, no hint of gloating. There was only a deep, bottomless well of sorrow. She had not won a prize. She had inherited a burden of memory and love. For the first time she spoke. Her voice was not loud, but it filled the cavernous silence of the room, each word perfectly clear, perfectly weighted. "He was a good man," she said simply. "He just wanted to be loved." The profound simplicity of her statement was more devastating than any accusation. It was the unvarnished truth, the moral of the entire sorry tale. In that moment, the transformation was complete. No one in that room saw a housekeeper anymore. They saw the woman who had truly known Alistair Blackwood. They saw the custodian of his soul. They saw the rightful heir to a legacy of kindness that dwarfed the monetary fortune it came with. Ilara stood up, her movements graceful and unhurried. She gave a small, respectful nod to Mr. Davies. "Thank you, Arthur," she said, using his first name with the quiet familiarity of an old friend. He nodded back, a genuine smile finally gracing his lips. Without a single glance back at the family she had just displaced, Ilara Vance walked out of the room, leaving the scent of lemon polish and old leather behind, replaced by the clean, sharp air of justice. The story of what happened next was not one of extravagance. Ilara did not move into the master suite of Blackwood Manor or drape herself in the jewels of Alistair's late wife. The 1958 Aston Martin remained in its garage, a silent monument to a different kind of life. Instead, weeks later, construction began on the manor's sprawling west wing. It was being converted into the Alistair Blackwood Memorial Library and Community Arts Center, free and open to the public. The vast gardens were redesigned to include a public park and a vegetable garden to supply the local food pantry. The company shares were placed into a charitable trust, with its profits mandated to fund scholarships, affordable housing projects, and care for the elderly. Ilara had understood the letter perfectly. The fortune was not a prize to be owned, but a tool to be used. She became not a lady of leisure, but a tireless steward, ensuring that Alistair Blackwood's legacy was not one of cold, hard cash, but of enduring, life-changing warmth. She had inherited a kingdom, and she had turned it into a sanctuary, proving that the greatest wealth is not what you accumulate for yourself, but what you give back to the world.